In this lecture, I'll be introducing the basic branches of philosophy. First, metaphysics, often called first philosophy, which is concerned with reality. Logic, which is the science that evaluates arguments and is the tool that we use when we're doing philosophy. Third, epistemology, which is the study or inquiry into knowledge itself. And lastly, ethics, which is often substituted for axiology and is concerned with morality. In this lecture, Aristotle is going to take center stage. Aristotle was a prolific philosopher who wrote in the early days of philosophy in ancient Greece. Instead of just listing some examples from each branch, I'll use some of his ideas to introduce each branch and to give an example of how all of these ideas can fit into a philosophical system. So, what to discuss first, metaphysics or logic? Since we can't do any of the other branches of philosophy without logic, it seems appropriate to place it first, but since metaphysics is often called first philosophy, I'll just start there. Generally, it examines reality, in Aristotle's terms, being qua being. What does it mean for something to be? This would come to be the central question of a sub-branch of metaphysics called ontology, but I'll try as much as possible not to subdivide these basic branches of philosophy. For a basic introduction, metaphysics is metaphysics. But Aristotle answers these questions with his categories in his logic, his metaphysics, and somewhat in his physics. Metaphysics is a mid-16th century term representing the medieval Latin metaphysica. It's based on the Greek ta meta te physica, the things after the physics, referring to the sequence of Aristotle's works. The title came to denote the branch of study treated in the books that were organized together after the book entitled Physics. So, it's kind of a lucky accident that this area of study has such a cool name. It was later interpreted as meaning the science of things transcending what is physical or natural, and that's not entirely incompatible with our modern notions of metaphysics. Other philosophers were doing metaphysics before Aristotle, but the name comes from his work, and he gave one of the fullest and earliest systematic accounts of a metaphysical view. For Aristotle, you could say, it is the study of reality itself. What is isness, or being? What is? Of what is it like? What could be, what could not be? Early thought gave rise to the concepts of universals and particulars. For Plato, for example, universals are primary, and particulars are secondary. For Plato, we recognize particulars on account of their participation in, or imitation of, universal forms. For Aristotle, particulars are primary, universals are secondary. For Aristotle, we recognize universals on account of what all particulars share in common, and we abstract from those to recognize the form of those objects. As a simple example, consider a tree. Plato is likely to say that we recognize a tree because the tree participates in the universal form of the tree. Aristotle, on the other hand, says we have an idea of the form of a tree because of all the particular trees we've encountered. For Aristotle, learning about something or understanding something means to gain an understanding of causes. The causes that Aristotle was concerned with, he also referred to as principles. Metaphysics can also be thought of as the science of first principles. The following are examples of some metaphysical principles, or laws of being. If something exists, certain principles will apply. If something is A, it cannot be both A and not A. A is equal to A. If any X is A, then A is not A. That all sounds pretty strange the first time you hear it, but as we become more comfortable with logic, this kind of talk will become less unusual. Aristotelian causes explain anything that is, comes to be, and the changes in those things. Our typical understanding of cause today is roughly force. What caused me to fall, for example, was someone forced me off a cliff. This type of cause Aristotle calls the efficient cause. Who or what did it questions ask for the efficient cause. Aristotle's conception of causes includes 4 kinds: the efficient cause, the material cause, the formal cause, and the final cause. Let's look at these causes with some examples. The efficient cause, what made it happen, would be natural processes in the growth of a tree, or human action in the building of a house. The material cause, what is it made of, in the case of a tree would be from the seed of another tree. In the case of a house, the wood from a tree. The formal cause, what is the shape, nature, or form? A tree growing tall and extending its branches, a house with walls and a roof. The natures of these things give them their potential. The final cause, what is its purpose? A tree to grow into a fully formed tree from nutrition and flourishing, and a house to provide shelter. These are the end goals, the telos, and all 4 causes are involved in explaining this final cause. To fully understand something on this view means to understand all 4 causes. All change is characteristic of the natural potency in things. All things have potential due to their form, and change is when some potential is actualized. A simpler classic example would be that of a statue. The efficient cause of the statue is the sculptor. The material cause is the stone it's carved from. The formal cause is the form of a thinking man. The final cause is to provide a long-lasting, aesthetically pleasing representation of a concept. This is also the good of the thing. Therefore, the full explanation of the statue is the efficient cause, or who brought it about, the material cause, the stone which will last long, and the formal cause, which communicates the concept, and the final cause, to provide the decoration. For final causes, on this view, artists do not only create, but they also discover. The musician discovers and actualizes potential in the physics of sound, and the sculptor actualizes the potential in the physics of stone, or bronze, or whatever he works with to create the statue. Aristotle adds categories to his principles of being. 1. Substance. 2. Quantity. 3. Quality. 4. Relatives. 5. Somewhere. 6. Sometime. 7. Being in a position. 8. Having. 9. Acting. And 10. Being acted upon. As a segue from Aristotle's metaphysics to his logic, notice that his laws of being mirror his laws of thought. In his logic, the law of non-contradiction states the same thing as his first law of being. If something is A, it cannot be both A and not A, at least not at the same time and in the same respect. The next law of thought is the law of identity. A is equal to A, because they are the same thing. Lastly, the law of the excluded middle. Any X is A, or not A. There's no in between, and this follows naturally from the law of non-contradiction. Notice further that Aristotle's categories of being can also kind of be thought of as categories of thought. We can give examples of each category syllogistically, as I'll explain more fully when we get into the logic proper portion of this lecture. A syllogistic example of the first category's substance could go as follows. All rational beings are animals. I am a rational being. Therefore, I am an animal. 2. Quantity. All couples are 2. We are a couple. Therefore, we are 2. 3. Quality. All ballers are tall. I am a baller. therefore I'm tall. 4. Relatives. You are taller than me, I am taller than him, therefore you are taller than him. 5. Somewhere. The gang is all here. You are not here, therefore you are not gang. 6. Sometime. All miracles happened last night. That happened today, therefore that was not a miracle. 7. Being in a position. I am here, you are there, therefore you are not me. Having. All moral beings are rational. Lions are not rational, therefore lions are not moral beings. 9. Acting. All players are playing. You are not, therefore you are not a player. And 10. Being acted upon. The middle class is hurting. You are not hurting, therefore you are not middle class. The fit between the nature of reality and the nature of our minds can be looked at in different ways. One way to look at it is to say that nature is rationally ordered, and theists are going to like this articulation. But another way to say it is that rationality is naturally ordered, and atheists will like this way. So, in Aristotle's system, the way we think matches the way things are, so logic is possible, and epistemology is possible. This connects Aristotle's metaphysics, logic, and will soon connect his epistemology, and finally to his ethics as well. Because nature and the mind are ordered similarly, we have epistemic access to the natural world. That brings us to logic, Aristotle's tool for science and philosophy. Logic is the science that evaluates arguments. Arguments are not fights or debates. They are conclusions supported by premises that aim at truth, not appearing right, as in debates. If we have well thought out beliefs, then our beliefs will be conclusions with premises that support them. Premises are our reasons for believing what we believe. This is why logic is sometimes called the study of correct reasoning. Though early philosophers and mathematicians were able to think logically, it was Aristotle who first developed a robust and systematic account of logical reasoning. Aristotle is thought to be the first to introduce the use of letters as variables, a practice that would continue throughout the development of logic and eventually even be adopted by mathematics as well. Aristotle's logical system, as we said earlier, was syllogistic logic. A syllogism is an argument with two premises that share a middle term that connects the premises by relevance and is excluded from the deduced conclusion. A categorical syllogism is an argument that sorts things into categories or excludes them from categories. Like any complete syllogism, they have two premises and one conclusion. The giveaway words to notice a categorical syllogism are the words all, some, or no. These are similar to indicator words that you'll learn about in critical thinking. The syllogistic argument that lives rent-free in every philosophy professor's mind is the following. Premise 1. Socrates is a man. Premise 2. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. The major term in this syllogism is the widest category, mortal. The minor term is Socrates, and the middle term that connects the first two premises in the conclusion is man. An example of a syllogistic argument that excludes could go as follows. Premise 1. Socrates is a philosopher. Premise 2. No philosophers are sophists. Therefore, Socrates is not a sophist. In this example, the major term is sophist, the minor term is Socrates, and the middle term that connects the two premises is philosopher. This links to Aristotle's epistemology. The central questions of epistemology are, what is knowledge, and how can we acquire knowledge? Aristotle answers these questions with science and logic. Aristotle knows that his syllogistic logic is deductive and valid, so, as long as the premises of his arguments are true, his conclusions must be true also. This means his epistemology fits in systematically with his metaphysics, physics, and logic. Here I'll present a simplified version of Aristotle's epistemology, just as I did for metaphysics and logic. Even though these are simplified explanations, they'll give you a general idea of his philosophical system, so that were you to study Aristotle in more depth, you'd go into it with an idea of how it all works and fits together. For Aristotle, we can acquire knowledge through his scientific process of observation and logical demonstration. For example, Aristotle observed animals in his biological works, setting out taxonomical views of kingdom, genus, species, and so on. Since the laws of being and categories of being, as we discussed in Aristotle's Metaphysics, correspond to the laws of thought and categories of thought, we can reliably come to understand and know the world around us. Therefore, we can use our scientific findings as premises and valid arguments to acquire knowledge. So, as an example of Aristotle's method of demonstration, let's imagine we want to prove that something is a mammal, a warm-blooded vertebrate with hair. Premise 1. All men are mammals. Premise 2. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is a mammal. According to his metaphysics, the categories of thought match the categories of being, so this is a valid argument. The truth of the premises is verified by biology, and the conclusion is sound, thus knowledge. Using scientifically verified premises and deductively valid arguments provides us a method of demonstration. Though much of Aristotle's science has been drastically improved upon, and the logic has been substantially expanded over the last few hundred years, this approach seems quite similar to our current methods of reasoning and acquiring knowledge. Indeed, we use information literacy to find reliable information, be it scientific, mathematical, etc., and we use that information in premises, in logical arguments, to arrive at valid or strong conclusions, which we find to be sufficient for knowledge. It should be no surprise that Aristotle's ethics telescopes quite well into his metaphysics, logic, and epistemology. As I'll attempt to show, they're all interconnected systematically. For many of the ancient Greeks, ethics was about the good life, virtue, understood as human excellence, and the state of the soul. For an understanding of Aristotle's ethics, we need to return to his metaphysics. Recall his four causes: the efficient, material, formal, and the final cause. If we look at the spectrum of life forms, soul and life being similar in concept for the ancient Greeks, we can analyze them according to these causes. Let's consider the lowest life forms first and work our way up from there. The efficient cause of plants, that is, the force that makes them happen, would be natural processes. The material cause would be a seed from another plant of its kind. The formal cause would be its nature that gives it the potential to grow and to blossom. The final cause, its purpose, would be to become a fully developed member of its kind. Plants only enjoy the vegetative, nutritive, and reproductive principles of life. So, for a plant to be good and flourish, it needs to reach its full potential in each of these principles. Similarly, if we move up to animals, animals' efficient causes would be biological processes, developing from other animals as their material causes, with their formal cause being their genetic potential to mature into fully functioning members of their kind, with their final causes of freely pursuing pleasures and avoiding pains. Of course, animals require lower necessities of the nutritive, vegetative, and reproductive soul, like plants do. But if they're not able to meet the necessities of their higher appetitive and locomotive principles of life, then they cannot be said to be flourishing. But if they can, this is their highest good, and they can be said to be flourishing. So we move up one more level to humans. The efficient cause of humans would again be biological processes and the efforts made by their parents. The material cause would be the parents themselves. The formal cause would be our nature that gives us the potential to grow. And the final cause, our purpose, would be to meet and exceed these lower necessities for survival and to reach our full potential in our unique, higher principle of life, above the plants and animals, growing into the fully functioning adults that we could be and flourishing. The principle of life or soul that humans enjoy uniquely is the so-called rational soul. Just like plants and animals need to reach their full potentials in the principles unique to them to be good and to flourish, so must we. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for humans to flourish, we need to have our lower physiological needs taken care of, such as the nutritive and appetitive principles of life, and the higher rational needs taken care of, like self-actualization. This means we must reach our full potential in reason in order to flourish. And what does that look like? Flourishing in reason would be called wisdom, along with everything that comes with it. When a person becomes wise, they will reason well about life, come up with better reasons for doing better things, and make good decisions based on reason. Which means they will likely have better outcomes in all that they do in life. They will at least make fewer bad decisions. They will recognize what is fair, what is too much, what is too little, and become just people in the process. They will also recognize consequences and their odds and conflicts. They will know what is reasonable to be feared, what is reasonable not to be feared, and they'll be able to act on that knowledge, making them courageous people. They'll recognize what behaviors are, however tempting, potentially harmful, giving them self-control. Therefore, a person who reaches their full potential in every principle of life, from the nutritive to the rational principle, will be healthy, free, wise, just, courageous, and temperate. And these are the cardinal virtues. In short, a good, flourishing person will be virtuous in accordance with reason. There is more to this view, and it will be covered in more depth in future lectures. But as a final remark on this view of ethics, something that separates it from the other major views that we'll be analyzing in the future is it's a character over action view. On virtue ethics, the conditional relationship between a good person and practicing good behavior is reversed. An analogy will help here. If you've ever played an instrument, imagine the first time you played it. What was that like? Perhaps fumbling, very difficult, very unnatural. How was it the 10,000th time? Do you even need to think about it anymore? Did it become reflexive? Was it you? What's important here is that this view is not a view that says if you're a good person, then you'll practice virtuous behavior. Instead, the idea is if you practice virtuous behavior, then you will become a good, flourishing, and happy person, a state that the ancient Greeks called eudaimonia. In summary, in this lecture, we used simplified articulations of Aristotle's metaphysics, logic, epistemology, and ethics to introduce these major branches of philosophy and show how they can all fit together in a philosophical system. In Aristotle's metaphysics, we discussed what is real, specifically the properties of being. In his logic, we discussed his classical syllogistic reasoning. In his Epistemology, we looked at a method for acquiring knowledge through empirical evidence and logical inference. And finally, in Aristotle's virtue ethics, we examined the good life, how to become good, and human flourishing.